Will I lose my business? Will I lose all my employees? Um, the frustration of having to say that they had to be laid off and the unknown about whether you would get them back, that is absolutely the lack of control.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to this episode of the Business of Happiness podcast. Today is going to be a great day because we're going to talk about when something goes wrong, when you have a perceived failure. Has that ever happened when something in your practice, in your business, catastrophically went wrong? What do you do? Does that immediately put you in a place of defensiveness and fear? Or can it spark enormous creativity and innovation? Today, we're talking to Dr. BJ Moorhead. He is a general dentist in Lexington, Kentucky. And a moment like this happened in his practice, and he shares it with us in this episode. So please listen for it. You'll find out something devastating that happened to him when he was working on a patient one day. But more exciting than the story is what happened subsequently, how he turned this painful lesson into an incredible opportunity to see even more of his passion introduced into the profession and sparked a whole new idea for a side business that can actually support our profession to a greater degree. I love this conversation because he shares with us some of his superpowers unique to him and how focusing and harnessing on those things that really make him unique has created an opportunity for something incredible and possibly transformational for many businesses. So join me in welcoming Dr. BJ Moorhead. Hello and welcome to the Business of Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tarryn MacCarthy. We have with us today a very special guest. We have with us Dr. BJ Moorhead. Welcome to the show today, Dr. William Moorhead. We're so excited to have you here.
Dr. MacCarthy, it's a delight to be with you.
So excited to have you here because one of the ways that I was introduced to BJ is we were taking this course together, and I found out that you have a superpower that is such a great asset to businesses in dentistry and beyond, but you've been really focusing on dentistry, and that is streamlining for efficiency and for better transition of new team members onto the team and to get people caught up on speed with their ability to run the practice and to jump right in and to keep your practice flowing at a very high level. Tell us a little bit about how you came up with this and what your business is all about.
Thank you, Taryn. Um, in 2010, I created StreamDent out of an obvious need that we had. I'm in a rural area, a huge town of 3,000 people. It's not the middle of nowhere, but you can see it from here. And I don't get trained people. I have to hire people from factories, from Applebee's. The industry standard for bringing someone in that's not in dentistry is 3 to 6 months to accomplish competency. And you know that's very taxing on practices. Now, I define competency as they can either do it on their own or they know how to look it up on their own so that they can work by themselves. With the tools I've created over the years and improved, and it's been so handy during the pandemic.
Yeah.
I can be able to get someone either in the business office or clinical side at the competency stage in 4 to 6 weeks.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's great. I mean, so one of the reasons why I thought this was just so important to bring to my audience right now is because in this climate, BJ, so many of us are needing to hire on a regular basis. The inundation of people leaving the dental world and then just changing their jobs in the entire sector on a frequent basis seems to just be happening across the country. Everyone I'm talking to is hiring and retraining team members at the moment, and not just one. Often it's multiple team members, and that adds another whole layer of stress because there's not always an extra team member on board who can support them and train them.
Yeah. And even if you have that extra member on board, you get into the problem of tribal training. tribal training, Mary, that you spent all the time in detail showing them exactly as a dentist how you want it done, but then Mary's going to leave and she trains Jessica, but it gets watered down. And then Jessica leaves later and Susie gets trained. By the time that goes through a few generations, everything that you taught them is lost. Well, most things are lost. They found an easier way to cut corners, but it caused problems.
It's like that old game of telephone. Remember that game where you told one person something and by the end nobody even had the same sentence that they started out with?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so tell us about how you address this. So what is so special about this technique that you've invented here?
Consultants have for years talked about using SOP, standard operating procedures.
Mm.
Back about 15 years ago, a surgeon in medicine, Atul Gawande, headed the World Health Organization, and he wrote the classic book, The Checklist Manifesto. If you haven't read it, I'd strongly recommend it. It sounds boring. It's really an interesting and an easy read.
Anything by Atul Gawande is fascinating.
And in it, he says that all professions have 3 expectations: selflessness, skill, and trustworthiness.
Hmm.
What he added to medicine and revolutionized that area is the expectation of discipline, like aviation. And to bring it home, let's pretend like you, the viewer, are getting ready to get on a plane and you find out that the pilot and the co-pilot won't run their safety checklist. Do you want to get on that plane? Of course not. But we run our dental offices like that every day.
Hmm. You mean just by the seat of our pants without having a checklist?
We expect it to be all up here, but we expect our teams to perform at that level. So we go to professional school, we have a doctorate. We expect the same thing out of the sometimes even high school graduates.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to find a simpler way. Um, to give you a medical example, when I go in for a blood test, they now put a band around my wrist like they used to only do when they were admitting a patient.
Mm-hmm.
Before they draw the blood, they ask me my name and my date of birth, make sure it matches here, make sure it matches their paperwork, so that there can be no mix-up in that blood work, and there's an audit trail. We can apply the same principles to dentistry and so simplify it and make it so much more predictable.
I love it. I love it. And the other thing that it takes out of the equation is emotion or stress or outside events that are impacting our forebrain from making critical decisions in that moment. So you never know if there's something going on with your team member and they just can't think clearly. But if they have a nice process to follow, it takes away that unwanted variable.
I can't say it will take it away entirely, but it will reduce it substantially. How's that?
Yeah. So give us an example of one of the systems that you've worked out within the dental practice.
When, first of all, StreamDent is cloud-based software that it's customizable checklist for running a dental office.
Okay.
Since I've been working on it for 10 years, I have it. Many dentists would look at it and say, overbuilt. There's too much in here. It's daunting. I would never be able to accomplish this. If you look at your day, you do 10 to 15 procedures over and over again. And if you go to the bother of whether it's your checklists, what I've got available, whatever, if you go to the bother of templating those things out, then you're going to have 95% of your day covered. So an example, let's set up for a crown prep. I want my dental assistant that's experienced to set up for it just like they always do. Mm-hmm. Then take 15 seconds to bring up the list, look over, oh, I missed that. I have offices that have like 4 dentists in the office and they brag, the dental assistants brag, they get to look good every time because StreamDent has their back, because they have everything out and ready. And there's no times when, and you've seen it multiple times, when the dentist is left there twiddling their thumbs while the dental assistant goes grab something, several times during the same procedure.
Oh my gosh, I'm thinking about my husband's an oral surgeon and sometimes goes and does procedures in the operating room with a whole new team member, a whole new
Mm.
team, and is often left in the middle of an operation where time is of the essence, patients under anesthesia, and now waiting for instruments, waiting for checklists that I wish they had had in the operating room that they desperately would have needed and been able to lean on in that moment.
ORs typically will use checklists, but when we bring dentistry into it, that's a different variable.
Exactly. ORs are very good at it.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that's great. So how has this impacted your practice? How has this impacted your efficiency in the office?
The biggest plus is two pluses. Number one, being able to onboard somebody efficiently and quickly. And the second is improving that efficiency to where we can be able, for instance, if you use the checklist approach in your new patient phone call and your team member, and we don't want them reading from a script. No, we want them to have a reference until they have it all up here. But
Mm,
if they use those systems on the new patient phone call, it's more likely the patient's going to make it in the door.
okay.
If you apply systems to your new patient exams, you're going to increase your case acceptance.
Mm,
If you apply systems to your uh, clinical procedures for setups, because it takes less time, it's practical to be able to add procedures same day, like from hygiene, from emergencies.
that's awesome. I have a fascinating thought here. Have you noticed this bleeding over into your personal life?
Um, I think it was the opposite, actually.
You
I
mean this was a superpower you had in your personal life?
Yeah, if you've ever studied a Colby index, my Colby index is 8814. I am someone that is a fact finder and has follow through.
So tell me how this started in your personal life.
Um, may I share how it started in my professional life first?
Either way, tell us
Okay.
everything.
Um, I've done sedation, IV sedation, moderate IV sedation since about 2000. I did the oral sedation route until '09, and I talked a couple of professors at University of Kentucky into starting an IV school. They ran it once a year. I was in the first class. At the time that this instance that I'm getting ready to talk to you about happened, I had been doing sedation for 8, 9 years and IV for about 6 months. I had a dear man as a patient on a Monday morning. I can remember this like it happened last week. He was 70, your ideal patient, compliant. He had a simple health history, very, very easy to work with. He followed all the instructions. He had come in the week before with bad swelling and pain. He had put off work for decades. And the only reason he showed up was because his wife made him show up. So we brought him in that day. He followed all the instructions. He was in PO, vital signs perfect, got the IV in the first stick. Where he's 70, we're taught in dentistry and medicine in general, when you're sedating a patient with midazolam, Versed, those Valium cousins, that you want to go low and go slow. They're more sensitive to these medications. And I gave him a minuscule little 1 milligram dose. That's half of the normal thing that you normally give for a test dose, and a test dose is intentionally low to be cautious. And I'm watching him. I'm doing nothing for 2 minutes, double what I would normally wait to see how he reacts. And you listen to the pulse oximeter, it goes lower and lower and lower. I've had this happen plenty of times. I've done sedation for 9 years. I, by reflex, tip his head back like you're taught with
Mhm.
my, basic life support, right?
Open the airway.
And I reached for the oxygen. And I turned on the oxygen. And I did not like what I saw. The oxygen didn't come on. And I was tense and not too nice on the radio as I said to my staff, somebody didn't turn on the oxygen, get it on quick. And in what seemed like an eternity, they come back on the radio and say, "Doctor, the oxygen tanks are all empty." The same happened with the emergency oxygen. Both, not a drop of oxygen in the office. At this stage, again, I've done sedation for 9 years. I knew what to do, but that rattled me. And when you have an emergency, panic is not the thing to do. I had a staff member take me aside and look me square in the eye and say, "Doctor, you're not helping anything by getting upset." And it rattled me back. And I've got a reverse selection I can give. 30 seconds later, he was fine. There were no problems. I was even able to keep the sedation appointment. But that was the wake-up call. I had to change how I was doing things. So you ask how my personal life affects my professional. I'm a methodical guy. I'm a musician. I'm a pianist. I structure. I learned when I was a teenager how to be able to practice things effectively, how to be able to do things. I got lucky. I got to take piano lessons from my grandmother for 12 years, and she wouldn't have me play the whole song. She would assign this little page and a half. I mean, this is elaborate stuff with all of these little arpeggios in it, whatever. Bite off a piece at a time and work and get it together. I applied the same thing to StreamDent.
If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you didn't get into business to be miserable. The problem is that people feel that if their business gets busier, if they start becoming more successful, that happiness will eventually set in. But it can actually get worse. This is why I created the Business of Happiness Prosperity Coaching. In this one-on-one coaching, we look at how to redefine success on your terms and re-find the joy and the passion in your dream. Visit me at thebizofhappiness.com and become the happiest business owner you know. So just by taking little chunks as opposed to being overwhelmed by the whole big assignment, you can have more competence and confidence in getting through.
How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Oh my gosh, thank you for sharing that story with me. That sounds absolutely terrifying. But isn't it interesting how those moments are the ones that are our greatest teachers and opportunities for greater creativity and greater innovation? I honor you for that. That is such a great turnaround of that really fearful moment and then being able to see it as an opportunity to create something beautiful out of it.
Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Edison had a lot of failures. They learned from them. That's the key for us as dentists. Learn from the mistakes, then move forward and find a better way.
Has that been a philosophy of yours for a long time?
Having matured and found out that having to do it the same way over and over again and getting the same results doesn't accomplish anything. Yeah, with maturity.
I know. Isn't it interesting? We're always so afraid of those failures. We tend to demonize the failures, and often they're the greatest teachers.
Indeed.
Yeah. So tell us more about, I'd love to learn more about your personal life in terms of your piano and everything. So how did that influence your work? So definitely we see that methodical study, taking small bites, and that being a part of your learning in the dental and in the business world. But how else has that been a part of your journey in terms of music and your personal life?
If I had to be a musician for a profession, I wouldn't enjoy it like I do. I had a music professor friend. I didn't take music in college. My grandmother told me if I wasn't going to major in music, don't minor in it. So I wound up playing for a church when I was in undergrad. I wound up directing a choir when I was in dental school. But key thing is, kind of like we do in dentistry, or I hope most of us do in dentistry, I've continued to learn. I didn't just stay static. And if you love something, from me, it's music and it's dentistry. If you love something, you want to keep learning. You want to keep getting more involved.
So what do you love about StreamDent?
I have this selfish goal that is really not selfish. I want to change the paradigm in dentistry so that we don't think we've got to keep it all up here, that we can be able to reference something when we need to look up literature and have it handy to be able to error-proof the office, to be able to make things more efficient. In medicine, it is acceptable if you're in an OR and you don't know exactly what you need to do, it's acceptable to look at a manual. In dentistry, there's this stigma that it's all got to be up here. I think it's time that changed.
I love that. Just giving yourself permission to have access to the answers.
Exactly.
That's really great. That's really great. So, what is your vision for StreamDent?
As a cloud-based software, I've made it very affordable to where for an annual subscription that's less than $500, you can have access to all of these pre-built customized checklists. I would like to be a major player in dentistry in terms of impact. And yeah, we all want to gain something financially, but I want to make it simpler for dental offices. I want to make it simpler for teams. I want to make it where team members know that it's easy and there's less stress, so they want to stay working in our office.
Yeah, that's the key, isn't it? It's that idea of changing the lifestyle and the perception in the dental office so we can have it less stress and more enjoyment in the moment.
Yes.
Have you noticed that impact in your practice with this addition of the support of all the algorithms that StreamDent brings? Is there less stress?
There is less stress. There are certain personality types that don't want to use it. There are certain personality types that do. We tend to attract in dentistry people that are more detailed to be able to handle the level of stuff that we do. People that are very impulsive don't embrace it as well. I think if you look at the DISC personality types, the biggest DISC personality is S. So of the 4, DISC S is 60% of the population.
And those are the more social, status quo,
But they have
comfortable.
attention to detail. And so for about 3 out of 4 personality types, and probably for about 85% of people, it works. If it's somebody strongly impulsive that wants to be able to bing, 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 bing all over the place, probably wouldn't work. But then they probably wouldn't work in dentistry either.
I can imagine. And so how has this impacted you and your life in terms of happiness and well-being?
The biggest thing is calm because I don't have to worry about things. In our office, I'm a GP. We don't do that much endo, but when you set up for a root canal procedure, it gets complicated to bring everything in. And there's so much freaking stuff that you got to have ready. And we finally, because we were still with the checklist always having problems because there's so many little things, we took photographs of the dental assistance cart, of my cart, exactly where to put things. Oh, it's made it so easy.
Yeah, it does. Just simplifies it for everybody and gives you clarity. I think that's probably the key word here is the clarity over what the intention is. I think sometimes that's what gets missed in training or in procedures. It's what is the most important thing that we need to know for this procedure, and then what order do we do them in?
That's very perceptive, Tarryn.
Yeah, that definitely feels calming to me when we have more clarity of the direction we're going in. Yeah. And I'm sure it creates a lot of confidence in new hires as well, because they have a resource to fall back on.
That's the key.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. So, PJ, what is your definition of happiness?
My definition, I can't imagine where you've got a podcast named The Business of Happiness, how you would ask that question.
I know. I'd love to know because this is one of the things that I love to ask of my guests is because we all have different versions of happiness. And here we're being introduced to you with a really unique skill set, a really unique need for order and, putting systems in place. I'd love to know what happiness looks like to you.
For me, happiness has to come from inside. It's not going to be affected by uh, material things, by everything going perfectly. It has to do with how I react to things.
Mm.
That's the only thing I really have control over.
That's beautiful. And isn't that the truth? Is that something that you've come to over time with your maturity that you're talking
Oh,
about? Because it doesn't come naturally, BJ.
one of the biggest struggles I had early on and in the midlife is giving up control. Uh, when you give up control and you roll with the punches and you realize still that it's how I react that matters.
Mm.
That doesn't mean you can't help guide things, but if you have to be that control freak, that is the opposite of happiness.
So there sounds like there's a story behind that realization that you don't
It,
have control. Share
it,
that with us.
it's just life lessons. Too many hard life lessons.
Yeah, it's interesting, both probably in your personal life and in your professional life.
Yes.
Probably one of the biggest teachers for us in dentistry as business owners was the lack of control we had during the pandemic.
I can remember the day that they announced that we were going to have to close offices. And I had this mental picture of, will I lose my business? Will I lose all my employees? Um, the frustration of having to say that they had to be laid off and the unknown about whether you would get them back, that is absolutely the lack of control.
Mm, mm, mm. And so how did you come through that with that realization and that fear?
This is 2 years. We're filming this in early April. So it's 2 years and 2 weeks since that event. And of the 7 full-time staff members I have one still with me. That's how much it's turned over.
Mm.
Fortunately, that one person that I've kept is the hygienist that would be the hardest to replace. So I've gotten to thoroughly test how I hire and our systems for certain.
And that's such a great proponent for StreamDent as well, because when we don't have control over all those things outside of ourselves, and we do have that need for security, stability, StreamDent can come in and have those systems in place that can make it a little bit easier for the variety and the change that keeps happening to us on a daily basis.
You understand it well.
There you go. I see. I see how this supports your happiness, BJ. I see how this can help you. And I think that, this is such a valuable tool because you're right. There's so many of us in the dental world that were brought to this profession because of our desire to serve. And then this great skill set of attention to detail and a very high need for mastery of our skill and mastery of our taking care of our patients. It's very difficult to do that on our own. We need our team. We rely on our team. We excel because of our team. And when our team isn't able to function at their best, we feel it.
We do indeed. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for bringing this to the profession. I invite my audience to check it out. We'll definitely leave the links for my audience to find in the show notes. But I know that you also speak on the lecture circuit, and I know that you have some great resources online. So let our audience members know how they can find you.
You can find StreamDent at streamdent.com. Where I speak professionally, it's Dr. Moorhead, DrMoorhead.com. You can reach me at 502-509-1570. I speak on implementing the checklist concept and the advantages. I speak on treating anxious patients, medical emergencies. I'm one of two partners that teaches an IV sedation course here in Kentucky that's going to be launching in August of 2022 as well.
Very cool. All right, give us one little tip before you leave on treating anxious patients.
Listen.
Mm.
We ask open-ended questions. I document them well so that my users can get at them. I need to create just a simple little PDF that people can download from. That's an idea I'm going to implement.
There you go.
A downloadable PDF from the websites on open-ended questions to be able to know what the patient wants and what their hot points are that makes them anxious so that you can be able to properly take care of them. I just listen.
It's once again, it's that same concept of feeling comfortable and safe in your hands.
Yes.
Creating that environment. Wonderful. Thank you, BJ. Thank you for all that you do. And thank you for continuing to innovate so that you can bring all these skills to the rest of our community and to our profession. I appreciate you. And I appreciate you being courageous enough to face those fears and to overcome those fears with new creative solutions.
Tarryn, this has been a delight. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you to all of you for joining us today and just being brave enough to have a new perspective and to see how somebody else addresses some of these concerns that are real impactors on our daily life in practice and really have a big effect on our overall happiness and well-being. So thank you so much to BJ Moorhead for joining us today. And remember, when you feel good, that is when you can do good. Bye-bye.
Bye now.